Yep. Hey, there you go.
Okay. Greeting. I am the chair of the APA Asian and Pacific Islander Interest Group. Our group is fairly new as it was formed 2.5 years ago. Our goals are to bring together Asians and Pacific Islander planners, assist them in their career development, and discuss issues affecting the communities and neighborhoods that are predominantly Asian and Pacific Islanders. My name is Hing Wong. I'm the chair of this group. Over the past year, we offer a 4-part webinar series on conversations with Asian and Pacific Islanders in the planning field. Conversations include chats with planners from the public sector, private sector, academia, and nonprofit sector. The first 3 webinars have been recorded and are posted on our website with CM credits available. Today's webinar is part 4 of a 4-part series that features planners working in the nonprofit sector or have worked there. This webinar is also being recorded, and if you're AICP, please log in for your CM credits. The CM credit number is 9286235, or you could go onto the website and just search Asian and Pacific Islander. If you are not yet a member of our interest group, please consider joining by filling out a membership survey. Being a member is completely free, and you do not need to be Asian nor Pacific Islander to join. Members will receive periodic emails on our activities and events, as well as our quarterly newsletter. The website is www.apiplanning.org. I'll repeat it. It's www.apiplanning.org. And this website has all the past issues of our newsletters and recorded webinars. Todd Van Adlock, Programs Director, is today's moderator and will introduce today's program and the panel. Todd?
Great. Thank you, Hing. Thanks for the introduction and welcome everyone to part 4 of our 4-part series. So it's really exciting to actually close out this series. We're really excited about today's panel. We actually have 5 people. It's the most that we've had, but I think they all have a lot to share. 3 of the 5 are actually part of the same organization, but they all have history at other organizations in the nonprofit sector. So we feel like they would bring a lot from their other work that they've done in the nonprofit realm. I apologize if I'm going back for that to admit people into the session, but I will, before we jump into the panel, so this is going to be basically an open roundtable. So all 4 speakers will be on the screen at the same time. After I give a brief introduction for the 5 panelists, I'll actually take down this intro slide, and then I'll actually pin all the speakers on the screen so that they're all in front of you and you don't have to search to find who's speaking. But I guess we'll jump into that. One thing to note is if you do have questions along the way, since this is kind of an open forum, please ask them in the chat, and then we'll be monitoring the chat box. And if you do feel comfortable asking your question in your own voice, I'll call upon you to do so. But if not, I can happily ask your question to the panelist for you. So let's jump in right in. As you can see on the screen, our 5 panelists. First on the screen is Casey Bruno. Casey presently serves as Senior Transportation Planner for AC Transit, which is the largest public bus-only system in California. Prior to joining AC Transit, Casey was Senior Transportation Planner at the Longwood Collective, which is a nonprofit organization serving the Longwood medical and academic area in Boston. Casey received a Bachelor of Arts from UC San Diego and a Master of Science from the Pratt Institute. Next is Shao. Yi serves as Planning Manager of the Capitol River Business Improvement District in Washington, D.C., which helps to make the Capitol Riverfront neighborhood a clean, safe, and accessible and vibrant neighborhood. Yi studied community and regional development and city planning at UC Davis and UPenn. And then the 3 panelists that we have from National Capacity. National Capacity stands for the National Coalition for Asian Pacific American Community Development group, so National Capacity. So our 3 panelists from there are Roy Chan, Erika G, and Chheng Sim Bun. So for Roy is the Director of Neighborhood and Place-Based Strategies for National Capacity, which is a coalition of nearly 100 community-based organizations spanning 21 states and the Pacific Islands that focus on improving the lives of over 2 million Asian American and NHPIs living in poverty nationwide. Roy brings over 20 years of nonprofit experience to National Capacity. He holds a BA in architecture from UC Berkeley and a master's in urban planning from UCLA. Erika G serves as Associate Director of Community and Cultural Resilience for National Capacity. She brings over 20 years of nonprofit experience to the organization, including serving as a senior planner at Chinatown Community Development Center in San Francisco. She has worked in museums and cultural organizations in New York, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Erika holds a BA in history and art history from UCLA and a MS Ed in museum education from Bank Street College of Education. Chheng Sim is the small business specialist for National Capacity. She has a passion for financial wellness and economic vitality, particularly working with minority and women-owned small businesses and advocating for affordable housing and housing access. She has a BS in Community and Regional Development with a minor in African American and African Studies from UC Davis. She is currently pursuing a master's in Urban and Regional Planning at UCLA with a concentration in Community Economic Development and Housing. So I'm happy to welcome all 5 of our distinguished panelists today. As I said, I'm going to take down the intro slide, and then I will pin all the different speakers up to on the screen so that you can all follow them as they speak. Again, this is going to be an open roundtable, so they'll be able to talk as freely and ask as I ask questions and as we receive questions from you all as well. So I will open with kind of a starter question for all of you to answer, just to kind of expand more about how did you first learn about urban planning and get into the nonprofit sector? We don't have to go in order. If it could be Casey or it could be anyone who wants to jump in, or I can choose someone too.
I can start off. So when I first learned about urban planning, it was my second year at UC San Diego. I enrolled in a course on public and environmental health, and part of the class covered health disparities faced by economically and socially disadvantaged populations. This class, I would say, marked as an important turning point for me because it was the first course I had taken at that time that that bridged health sciences and sociology and opened my eyes to the relationship between societal factors and public health outcomes. And at that time, I was initially pursuing coursework focused on basic sciences, so biology and chemistry, with the hope of getting a nursing degree. And I thought I was going to be a nurse because my mom was a nurse and I enjoyed helping people. And so I honestly thought it was my only option at that time. But as I continued to take urban studies courses, I began to realize that my interests aligned closely with urban planning and making changes to places that improve the health and well-being of entire communities. And one aspect of nursing that appealed to me was helping people. And we get to do that in city planning. And the way I had worked myself into the nonprofit world was through experience in the private sector, working for transportation planning and engineering consulting firms and serving as a volunteer committee member on town's public transportation advisory committees, and realizing that as much as I had enjoyed the technical aspects of my job, I liked helping to deliver and implement projects more. not to say that my technical skills and not were not useful, but I had preferred the idea of working with the public directly and working to implement projects as opposed to working with the public through public sector clients. And my time and experience at the nonprofit that I worked at was invaluable because it had offered great first hands-on experience and understanding of soft skills that I thought were transferable to where I am now, which is the public sector. Navigating stakeholder dynamics, sensitive political matters as it relates to transportation, neighborhood level transportation issues, and relationship building skills.
Great, thank you, Casey. Anyone else want to jump in next?
I guess I can go next. So thanks for having me here. I just want to start it by saying that learning the urban planning really just starts when I have the opportunities. My parents, they are in the tourism industry, so I have the opportunities to travel internationally very early on and see and experience different kinds of cities. But it was kind of superficial by just visit a certain city for a few days or just half a month. It's not enough. But at that moment it was oh, urban planning is interesting, different transportation system and different public space that really raised my interest and curiosities. And that's why I choose my major in UC Davis, Community and Regional Development, to learn more about community and cities. And it's also good to know there's another alumni here with me as the panelist. Good to see you. And the reason why I joined my current organization is that one of the class that I took in my grad school is specifically about the Business Improvement District, which is a place-based organization, nonprofit organization, kind of serving as a liaison between private sector like the local businesses and developers and the government. And it was so interesting to learn how many roles this kind of organization can take on and what kind of disciplines you can working there as a planner. So that's why I started my job.
Great, thank you, Yi.
I can go next. Hello, it's nice to see a fellow Aggie. I first learned about urban planning in college. I think it's funny that, Casey was saying she was taking a lot of science classes. So I had started undergrad thinking I was gonna go into the medical field to be an anesthesiologist or a radiologist. So I went in as a biochem major. But I was taking all these science classes and nothing was really sticking. And I was looking through the course catalogs for different majors and I found an intro class to community and regional development. And I just took it as on a whim to see what else is out there. And I really enjoyed it because I think it's it's such an interdisciplinary field that we work in. And it's the class was talking about sociology, economics, history, and just all of these things. And it really resonated what they were saying. And looking back, I was oh my gosh, I experienced those things, housing access issues and things like that. So that's when I first learned about it. And during my undergrad, I had interned at a nonprofit called Cool Davis, and it's like a local organization with a mission of developing like community resilience for climate resilience within the community. So that's where I started, like with like an introduction to like nonprofit work. And many years later, I find myself at CAPACD, and it's a lot different because we don't work within like one community, but we're so national, so we work with so many different communities and neighborhoods through the nation. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Erika, I can definitely post your slides if you want to go next.
Okay, I can go next. So I have some slides that I'll be talking through just to give you some visuals, and then I'll be done with them. But so interesting, like I'd like to say that I'm an accidental planner. I did not go to planning school, and I was interested in planning, but I was like, I'm not going to go get a geography degree from UCLA, which is not even planning, and then go get a master's degree later. And so, I've had a career in museums and cultural institutions. And I want to say that like planning work doesn't necessarily, like you don't have to go to planning school. It's just, I've learned on the job, and I've learned to have a heart for the community that I've worked in. And in particular, that has been San Francisco Chinatown. But this is a slide of national capacity staff, and this is a park in Chinatown. And this is like culturally aligned playground equipment, and this is a lion that we're in. And so, it's very deliberate that we wanted playground equipment that reflected the Chinatown community. Next slide. And then this is just a bit about national capacity and who we are. So we're place-based, and we work in Chinatowns. And this is Norman Fong, former executive director of Chinatown CDC. Next slide. And then national capacity is a intermediary, and we do all these different programs that support Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. It includes housing counseling, and includes small business work, community organizing. And then I work in the space of creative placemaking. And we try to be as comprehensive to, the range of Asian American communities, as well as Native Hawaiian communities in the United States. Next slide. Next slide. I'm going to go through them fast. And this is our, so I work on creative placemaking, but let's stay here. This is an example of creative placemaking, what I call arts and culture and storytelling for neighborhood goals. And so what are culturally aligned and creative ways that we can get people to improve our communities and care about our communities and neighborhoods. Next slide. And so the area that I worked in the past, and I want to say that planning, you could work for a government or a regional transit authority, but a lot of the nonprofits also have, planning departments, and are really thinking about their neighborhood, and the planning and zoning and transit issues, in those areas. And so the organization I worked at before national capacity was San Francisco Chinatown, and it's extremely low income. It's very dense. It has a lot of community serving businesses, and that was the ones that we were trying to plan for. So, seniors and immigrant families that live in this, incredibly dense area that's that is most of the housing is single room occupancy hotels. So basically it's like living in a dorm with a shared kitchen and a shared bathroom, but it could be families and seniors and couples, all living in an 8x10 room. Next slide. And then we were thinking about like sort of what is the neighborhood infrastructure and how can we improve the neighborhood? So, there's public housing that was in San Francisco Chinatown. There's a bunch of parks, and, there's also, cultural assets like movie theaters and art centers. And those are all part of like this holistic neighborhood that we're looking at. Next slide. And so a couple of projects that I worked on, one is this Broadway streetscape project with the San Francisco Public Works. And it was to beautify like Broadway, which was a major thoroughfare, and there are trees. And so we asked the community, what would you want, in public art as, for the neighborhood. And so we did this community engagement. Next slide. And then what we ended up, what the artists or the community ended up selecting are these benches. And so these are benches based on clouds from Asian Chinese landscape paintings. But they're also benches that you could sit on as you go shopping or waiting for the bus. Next slide. And you can see them in action. So one is a prototype, and then the colored one is people enjoying the benches. And so instead of just saying like, oh, we just want public art for public art's sake, we wanted it to be functional and beautiful and reflective of the community. And then I'm going to have show two more examples. So this is a park in Chinatown. It's heavily utilized. People consider it their living room because many people live in these small areas, and so it's heavily unified, but it needs a update. So there's a planning process that CCDC, the organizations I work with, work very closely with the city to make sure that there is community participation. Next slide. And so this is some of the conversation that people had, like, what do we want? We want a big outdoor event space. We want a clubhouse. We need new lighting. So these are the things that the community sort of identified in thinking through a new space. And then next slide. And then this is the proposed design. So it has a new giant clubhouse. It's supposed to be a resiliency center so that it will have solar panels. If there's an emergency, people can charge their phone. So it's really reflective of the community's needs and wants. And then the last thing that I wanted to show, next slide, is like planning projects could be, fun and reflective. And this is a program that I worked on, and it's called Chinatown Pretty. And we thought, how are people, who are the people in our neighborhood? And this is the young people, and then this is a writer and a photographer, and they love Chinese old lady fashions. And so they went around to photographing people in the neighborhood. And then next slide. And then we did an exhibit of these people in the neighborhood. So, sharing their stories and who the people are. So the guy in the corner, he's wearing a red suit. Like he says, like, when you're a young man, you don't have to care about a fashion, but when you're an old man, you have to. And that's a direct quote from him. So, how people see themselves and their fashion. And then the last slide is we paired that with an economic development campaign. So do you want to dress like, these seniors? You could shop at the same places that they shop. And it's trying to uplift the neighborhood stores, and, maybe people didn't think like, oh, I could buy earrings, or I can buy, bolo ties, or, I can buy all these things in Chinatown. So trying to put a different lens on the people as well as the businesses. And so just an example of like a nonprofit that's doing work in the planning sphere. I'm passing off to Roy, and you can take down my slides.
Great, thank you, Erika. And isn't there a term? Is it called accidental hipster? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's a Chinese accidental hipster.
That's awesome. All right, I'll hand it to Roy.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Erika. Really appreciate the space. I want to say I feel like many of us work and none of us have time to reflect on why we do what we do. We just kind of keep pushing. And so really great question, Todd. Yeah, probably very similar to Sim Yi and Casey. Like I found out about urban planning as a profession in college. I was at UC Berkeley. I started as civil engineer and then like kind of like backed into architecture because I can hack it in chemistry, and then I graduated in architecture. But while I was at architecture school, I learned about urban planning because they were in the same department. So I was intrigued, but you know, I loved drawing and I loved cities. I just really love walking around cities and understanding how they work. And so that's what kind of drew me to architecture. And so I came out and worked for a few years in architecture firms, and you know, kind of became a little disillusioned because I realized I was much more fascinated and passionate about the people in cities as opposed to the built environment. That it was really about how people interact with the built environment, and not so much how to design the built environment, but how people live in the built environment, how that informs how we continue to evolve and design space and place. And you know, so I quit my architecture job and volunteered at a local nonprofit organization, community nonprofit organization in Oakland, Chinatown called Ibaltsi. And it was a very small organization back in the day, and I was a planner. And my first task was to walk around the neighborhood and document every building and construction type and who might live there, and just kind of like clues to the community, right? Understanding how people live in the in Oakland Chinatown. And then so I went back to planning school finally at UCLA, and really loved the program because the program was, it was place-based, but it was definitely more people-based and really people in terms of working with low-income communities of color and empowering them to have a voice and really, you know, really living up to and working towards this idea that, you know, planning is not just made a profession by planners, but we are basically really helping to hold the responsibility of everyday people and citizens, right, to self-determine their own environment and their future. And so that's the part I loved about the program. And, you know, since then, it's been kind of a windy journey. As you all know, urban planning is very multifaceted and multidisciplinary and can go a lot of different ways. And yeah, so, you know, I think my career, I've never worked for a public agency. I've always worked in nonprofit primarily. There was a stint where I worked for a startup doing like virtual reality stuff to kind of create environments for urban planners. But really was in the nonprofit field thinking about community development, community planning, and being an advocate for local residents to be able to demystify the planning process and engage in the process of determining their own futures. So I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you all for sharing your background and the stories about the work that you do. It's very broad. I mean, nonprofit is probably one of the more broad kind of sectors in the field, just because, I mean, it touches upon like where Casey used to work in Boston, it was transportation focused or had some transportation focus. National CAPACD looks at housing, anti-gentrification, belonging, kind of a lot of different aspects of community. Others just focus on housing. So it's very, very broad. Just looking at the chat, no questions in the chat. So if anyone has questions, feel free to write them in the chat. But I do have another question that I can ask. I usually ask this for the other groups that we've done. So what aspect of the nonprofit sector do you enjoy? And which ones do you find challenging or just don't like at all? It's okay to not like something. Sometimes things can be challenging or not your cup of tea, but not your favorite. But you can do either or one or the other. But I just curious because a lot of people in our participants in who are in the audience are either young or emerging planners or coming out of school, and maybe they might have a interest in the nonprofit sector. So curious to know things that you like or dislike, or just find challenging, I should say.
Okay, I can start. Oh, Casey, if you
No,
want to
no, go
start,
ahead.
feel
Yeah, go
free.
ahead.
Cool. So I will give a first shot on this. So I definitely enjoy like the planning, the learning experience in the nonprofit. I would say like in my organization, we touch on a lot of different planning aspects, economic development, transportation, placemaking, and like no one in my team really like has a dedicated like planning aspect. Like you have to get involved in all because you just work for the community, and whatever community has a needs of something, you have to respond to it, and you have to collaborate with different agencies and stakeholders to tackle those issues. So you will learn and participate the planning through like different stages: conceptual planning, financing, and implementation, like all of them. And it was very enjoyable, like for for a planner to track all of those like progress and also like get involved in every single of the step. And another thing, well, like the after the like talking about like the favorite part that I like about nonprofit, the aspect that I find it like more challenging is the implementation, because for most of nonprofit, I would say we have limited funding, so have the chance to like apply for the grant and also like ask for funding from the local or the regional level is a task and is a challenge with so many like similar organizations compete with each other. So there's always like funding limitations for the projects that you want to do. So that would be one of the challenges whenever you work in this sector. And another factor would be the involvement of different agencies on different level and different scales. Public sectors, the local government and the national government, they push and pull, and there in my working neighborhood there is some federal on the land but managed by like the local level. So there are like different level people that you have to engage whenever you need to like push for the implementation of a plan. And yeah, that's my experience.
Thank you, Yi. Casey, did you want to jump in? Or
Yeah,
Roy?
sure.
Yeah.
Go,
Yeah,
Casey.
go ahead, Casey. Go ahead, Casey.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, what I do enjoy, and also what I do enjoy, what I did enjoy working in the nonprofit sector was the mission driven work. So the organized nonprofit I used to work at was called the Longwood Collective, and it was a nonprofit that had a mission to support the Boston's Longwood neighborhood by providing services and taking part in initiatives that make it easier for people to live, work, study, and receive care there. And I supported that mission, and I really enjoyed the work that was involved in carrying out that mission. the organization itself had a collaborative environment. And that was very important to me. I got to work not only with different departments in the organization, but because of the Longwood neighborhood's proximity to various neighborhoods and connections to transportation systems governed by varying jurisdictions. I had the opportunity to collaborate with people from places like the city of Boston, the Massachusetts Department of Conservation, MBTA, the town of Brookline, Fenway, and Mission Hill neighborhoods. So it was the variation in collaborative work was one of the highlights of my experience there. And what I found challenging was the regulatory constraints, because for my role as a transportation planner, specifically, because 99% of the streets in the Longwood neighborhood were within either the city of Boston or the Department of Conservation Recreation jurisdiction. A lot of the transportation projects that I worked on were subject to regulatory requirements and bureaucratic processes. So if theoretically, you know, a member of the nonprofit I worked at wanted to improve patient pickup drop-off operations by changing road operations, you know, that coordination effort with a city or state agency would often add time to project implementation. And as a transportation planner, you want to implement and see projects right away. But due to a lot of regulatory constraints, project build was something you had to be patient about.
Yeah, Casey, I really resonate with the challenge around, particularly when you're working at a community level, the kind of balance the regulatory constraints of working with public sector while trying to meet the needs of the community. It is really challenging, and you're often caught in the middle, and having be the translator. Yeah, I want to say, you know, this question, I mean, the nonprofit sector is pretty broad, but I would say I'd probably point to my time at Chinatown Community Development Center in San Francisco, where I worked with Erika for many years. That time I felt, you know, I would say specifically around community-based, working for a nonprofit community-based organization, there's something about doing planning work and actually being among the people you're serving or you're working for every day. So, you know, one of the things in our planning team that Erika and I were a part of our, like, when you work in the city hall, you never actually go to, you rarely do, you don't find time to go to the neighborhoods that you are planning for as much as you would if you worked in the community. Like every day we would walk through Chinatown. We would take the bus to get there. We would see the local popos, you know, interact with people. And so it really is sort of ground truthing our planning work in a way that you just can't when you're working oftentimes at a higher level. And so, and then, you know, as you know, Casey was also mentioning, just sort of really seeing the everyday people and seeing them empowered at public hearings, hearing them have a voice in the sort of seeing what the local park's going to look like and having them be able to express what their needs are and what their assets are in these spaces is really rewarding. And so that's what I love about it, is just being in community, quite frankly, that you can't when you're working in City Hall or in a private sector. You know, I think the challenges is, you know, very much what Casey spoke of, you know, just the challenge of being an intermediary and having to negotiate the interests and the needs of the community with the bureaucracy of the city limits of the process. And oftentimes we have to be the bearer of bad news. And so, but also, you know, equally rewarding being an advocate for community members. So yeah, I think it's overall, it's I wouldn't trade working in the community for anything.
Yeah, I'll echo that from my end as well. It was really nice to be in the community, and I've been in museum programs, and sometimes it was like, okay, I'm going to design this program, and I hope people will come, and I hope the rain is not like bad weather, or else people won't show up. But like when you're in community and, in a community-centric organization with like organizers and youth and seniors and dedicated people who are working with specific, constituent groups, like if I wanted to do something with seniors, I could ask our organizer, like, hey, like Community Tenants Association, like we want to create a film based on, their 30 years of organizing. What do you think? And they could help navigate that and work with, with those community members, and they had the language access and this cultural sensitivity to be able to work with the filmmaker as well as work with the community. At the same time, it's also challenging working with community. Everybody has ideas on what they want Chinatown to look like. And some people want, to build high and have it look like Hong Kong. And other people are like, no, we need to make it pedestrian friendly and affordable for low income seniors and immigrants. And what is it? And some people are like, yeah, but if we do that, it looks like a dump. And then some people will say, but it's our dump, as opposed to high rises and skyscrapers. And so, there's always like weighing those community voices and challenges, because you can get it from all sides. Everybody has an opinion about the neighborhood and what should be done.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. I did want to, I saw a comment/question from Krishna. I wasn't sure if this was a question you wanted to ask to the group, but you're welcome to ask it if you wish. Otherwise, it was just a general thought. We can move on.
The reason I raised my hand was to build up on what Roy was talking about. Get immersed with the community. You got to get involved with them. That is important. As a planner, you've got to understand the client and the community. I've not worked directly for a nonprofit, but I've done work for nonprofit for the 4-H organization in West Virginia many, many moons ago. Spent the whole summer in their 4-H camp to understand what their needs are before I designed their community center. So, that was very well received. It's still working after 50 years. And I was pleased to hear a couple of years ago from their 4-H extension agent. So that's the kind of service you need to give. And most of the people in nonprofit do that. Some in the city, in the public sector might not. But I work for the public sector and I work for the private sector. And I was heavily involved with my projects with the client, spending a lot of personal time to make sure that the project succeeds. So with that, I'll end that diatribe. The other question I had, and it's on the chat box, and people can respond to it there, about an international competition on design. It was about placemaking. There were 10 different sites in Hyderabad. And, looking at this group, it might have been more useful, and we might have had some more candidates to participate. Thank you, Todd.
Great. Thank you, Krishna. If any of the speakers wanted to respond to that, I can definitely give you time. Otherwise, I have a few other questions that I can ask. And just looking at the chat, nothing is coming up. So again, welcoming more questions in the chat if you have any. Oh yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say something about the last question. I think that I started working at National Capacity, and it's a national nonprofit. And I think when I started, I was like, what is a national nonprofit? And so it's very different from like, you know, when you're working in community, like I've worked in nonprofits in community, but like nationally, like what does that look like and how are you actually able to connect to community? And I think there's a beauty to being a national nonprofit, like being an intermediary and like understanding so many different dynamics in different like states and neighborhoods and cities. So I think there's not just like one level of nonprofit. That's like what I want to like bring up. There's like you could be a national, regional, and things like that. So and then also a thing I really like is like there's no tunnel vision, like what everybody was alluding to, just like working with so many different parts of like the community, like you don't lose sight, you're like grounded in reality, which is like really beautiful, but also really challenging because you're like it's mission based, right? So like it's not like you can just be like I don't care what you say. It's you have to really take it all in because it's like your mission is to bring people together and like do these like community development things. Another challenge I think is like funding. I think it's like really tough for not like working a nonprofit, and that's the reality. And sometimes it's like having the conversation of being like, this is our mission, but how do we translate it in a way where we can get funders to fund us? And I think that is like challenging and can be frustrating at times because exist in like a profit-driven world, you know? So I think those are some of the challenges and things I do like, but just wanted to highlight those.
Great, thank you, Chheng. I apologize for glossing over you at that last question. I apologize, but no questions in the chat. One question it kind of relates to what we've all been talking to, and one of the examples that Erika showed was that the cloud benches, and then Casey kind of touched upon it in terms of often times when you're working with whether it's the city or the county or federal government or a state agency, when you want to get a project off the ground or get moving, sometimes there's red tape or there's a lot of steps that you have to do before you can actually get to the goal that you want, like the cloud benches. And oftentimes it seems like nonprofit organizations are kind of like the visionaries for the community, where like if it was left up to like the state DOT or the city DOT, the Department of Transportation, they have strict criteria of what can be built on in a right of way, and if it doesn't conform to that, it won't be built. But if a visionary group like a nonprofit gives them an idea that they may not be thinking of, especially if it's culturally specific, like in Chinatown, I know I worked with a neighborhood here in Chicago called Logan Square. Their Latinx community, they are introducing a lot of Mexican culture in a lot of the art pieces in their neighborhood. So, but they have to work really closely with the DOT, the transit agencies to get that all approved. So I guess the question is, how is that? Do you find that, I guess going back to the challenging question, and I think you all touched upon it in a little bit, is that does seem to be a challenge, but it also seems to be rewarding once you get there. Like the cloud benches are beautiful and a great representation of the community. So it can be challenging at the time, but once it's achieved, it's a very nice achievement, and it really shows what can be done if you have vision and kind of like community mindset. So I'm not sure if there's a question in there. I was just, if you wanted to expand on that, you're definitely welcome to.
Thanks, Todd. I definitely wanna to add one thing on this. I'm very touching, like, you know, everyone's response on like the kind of relationship with the community and working like really for the community. And I think one of the aspects that you work in this nonprofit sector is you can build trust with the community. Like community is willing to sharing, you know, what they really like their community to be look like, with this kind of like middleman nonprofit. In DC, especially like in our neighborhood, like we have this kind of a neighborhood associations. those neighborhood associations serving as like, the representative from the community. But usually they are not like, so they don't get along very well with our local agencies. And that just become vicious circle. Like it just getting harder and harder to like having the community to support the projects, even the projects has like agreed benefits for the communities from the local government. And also the local government was also reluctant to like, to do more community engagement because they feel like it's always it's gonna always get bad. So being in my organization, kind of serving as this kind of liaison in between the neighborhood association, the commissioners, and like DDOT and Department of Transportation or the Department of Recreation, Parks and Recreation. So I think that's like one of the aspects that I really value and I really appreciate.
Great, thank you. If there's any other thoughts, I know I did see a question in the chat from Tan. If you wanted to ask your question yourself in your own voice, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I can ask it for you.
Sure, I'll ask. Appreciate y'all being here and having your time. I'm from North Carolina, so it's late in the evening, so we appreciate y'all hosting this session. So my question though is I work for a county government and I'm hearing a lot of great things from y'all about how you're engaging the community and really connecting with the public. How can we as a local government at the regional level or even municipality help y'all in your efforts there? And also my second question was any resources you would recommend?
I can start off with that. So right now I am currently I'm now working in the public sector, but I haven't been in it for that long. But I really think that the role that local government has in supporting nonprofit agencies and their mission and the communities that they serve is engaging with nonprofit agencies at the beginning of the process, at the beginning of any planning study or any kind of construction work, and allowing them to be a part of the process the whole time. I think that certainly helps maximize the impact of nonprofit efforts and their relationship with community residents.
I can go next, I guess. Just like a few more points adding on that. I think the local government can definitely help by delegate a little bit power to the nonprofits. It's also like, I guess, depends on different locations you're in different states. I can only like speak for District of Columbia right now. I know like for my organization and another business improvement district next to us, we want to do like this collaborative mobility study. However, we don't have the authority to like do those master plans. So it's kind of just like we wanted to do that, and we also like ask for our Department of Transportation to do that. But with the limitation on the financing on the grants and also like their staff capacity, it's just very hard to kind of achieve our mission to build this connectivity across the neighborhoods. And yeah, I think if the nonprofits can have more power in leading all those process, a lot of things could be like get going faster. And yeah, that's my experience and my answer for this question.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts on this particular question?
I mean, just very quickly to add on to that, I think, oftentimes if the city's engaged in a process, whether it's a visioning process or a transportation project, that they usually hire a consultant. The consultant works with the community, but I think the third piece in the third leg in that stool needs to be a local nonprofit that actually the city or the municipality contracts with. So not just free labor, but you're paying the nonprofit to actually do the work. Because I feel like oftentimes municipalities shortchange the value that local nonprofits bring and the expertise, the local expertise that brings to the table. So they're often just giving feedback rather than actually being an expert and a paid expert in the process. So when Erika and I were at Chinatown Community Development Center, our organization was hired on through San Francisco Metropolitan Transportation Authority to actually be on their consultant team, to actually be the community liaison, the local ambassadors, to both give feedback to the transit planners, but also to communicate issues that were going on during construction to the neighborhood, and also to give us agency to be creative, right? With whether it's design of public space or a marketing project that we know the community, we have to trust, as Yi mentioned, with the community. We can design something that's culturally relevant, that connects to the community, but yet, as a nonprofit, we're compensated for that work. So.
I also think that adding on to, the points that were made, I think public agencies can also do a part in just like keeping up the relationship. I feel like sometimes it's like project based, and so you're like, okay, that's it, like we don't need you anymore. And I think that's kind of, I think that like doesn't create the space to build trust and that repertoire and actually be connected to the community all the time. I feel like that's another way to like empower nonprofits to achieve their mission. And I think I see your question. It says also like nonprofits, regional nonprofits. I feel like I meant to say like nonprofits like serving regions. So we work with various nonprofits that aren't technically like place-based. They serve people in a large region, like all of like, let's say like SoCal. They serve like folks in SoCal, or they serve folks not just in like so not just in Long Beach, but also in like LA area, San Diego area, just like folks coming in. I don't know if that's what you meant by like resources that come to mind identifying regional nonprofits. I don't know if I answered that part of your question, Todd. But yeah, there's just nonprofits that serve regions. And I don't know if it's like something they explicitly say, but once you like get them started talking on the work, then they're like, oh yeah, we just like serve like a region. We don't have like, you don't have to live in a certain zip code for us to serve you and things like that.
Sure, no worries. And it seems like there's a lot of sharing of resources in the chat box, which is great to see. I know Roy, Erika, even I think Krishna was sharing some resources and thoughts too. So that's really great to see. Just scrolling through the chat, see if there's any other questions. I'm not sure if Krishna, if you wanted to expand on anything that you shared, but thank you for sharing the resources.
Yeah, Todd, one of the big problem nonprofits face is funding. Where do you get the money? Todd, I will not hesitate to go and talk to some of the area businesses particularly the big corporations and all, a lot of them have foundations which do philanthropic work. That's a good source to tap into financial assistance. And mayors and all, I remember way back in West Virginia, I worked for a regional planning council, and I was delegated to 6 different communities. I would go to the city council meetings in the evening, and then I'll hang out after the meeting for another hour or so, talking to the citizens, try to improve the quality of life for them. That built a relationship which was invaluable for the communities. They prospered. Helped them convert a bowling alley into a municipal office. One of the county commissioner tapped me to do that 4-H work for the extension through the extension office, design the 4-H camp for them. That was all volunteer work, over and above the job. But you never know where you will find the resource and where you might find a supporter. So keep your ears and eyes open. Do not hesitate to ask for help. Even if you get a no one time, go back again later on. There will be a right time when that same person is going to help you out. Okay, so some places like here, we had a rundown area just south of downtown in Las Vegas, where I'm located. Over the last 10 years, we've been converting that into an art district. There's been private sector investment, there's been public sector investment, nonprofits have popped up over there. That area has changed to the extent now, so there are 2 developers building about 600 apartments. A new hotel has been built. The electronics, the technology in that hotel will be mind-boggling for anyone. So keep on plugging. Like Mr. Mitchell said today, Mitch McConnell, there comes a time when you move on. I'm in the sunset years, and you people are in the sunlight years. Just the dawn of your careers. Keep up the good work. Keep the flag flying. Thanks, Todd.
Great, thank you, Krishna. And Joyce just asked a request if we could collect all the resources and share them later. We definitely can do that when we post the link of the recording on our website. I just put the link, pasted the link back in the chat, so that if you want to keep an eye on that, we'll share the video once this is done, plus any of the links that are collected in the chat. And then we may be able to also share it in an email blast as well, but there'll be different ways. If there's no more questions, just keeping an eye on the time. So we're at 7 past the hour. We have about roughly 22, 23 minutes left.
Hey, Todd.
Yes.
Krishna again, sorry.
Okay, that's okay.
Somebody had mentioned affordable housing earlier, one of the panelists. In the international division, we just had a round table on affordable housing. We got a link, I'll get that link to you, where we have been collecting articles and data about affordable housing. And I'm planning to follow that up with an international powwow or a workshop with people from India and Uganda on affordable housing. So if any one of you can contribute to it, we'll welcome it. And if not, you're welcome to participate in it when it takes place.
Great, thank you. Sorry, I'm just copying and pasting a lot of the chat links because I'm not sure if these all go away once we log off. So, but thank you for Casey. I know Casey needed to log off to jump to another obligation, but thank you. Hopefully everyone can join me in thanking Casey for serving as one of our panelists. So thank you, Casey. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. It was very nice meeting everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel with a great group of people. And hopefully I can find you all on LinkedIn and keep in touch and updated on all your fabulous efforts.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey.
you all.
Thank you. Just looking at the time again, it's 9 after the hour. So about 20 minutes left. Just looking at if there's any other questions. No questions right now. One question, another question that I had is, so a lot of us are either immigrants ourselves, or maybe our parents or our grandparents, or even further removed, further in our lineage. But how has the immigrant experience helped shape your perspectives, especially in the work that you do? I know a lot of times the people you work with, the community you work with, are immigrant communities too. So maybe it's your own experiences or the people that you work with, the stories that you hear. How does that shape the work that you do as a planner in the nonprofit sector?
Well, some of it is like understanding the community and being able to meet them where they're at. So one of the things about that Portsmouth Square planning, parks planning process, we had to have multiple community meetings. So we had to have some at night so that people could come, after work. But then we also had to have them slightly earlier because seniors don't want to be out late at night. And then for the people who work in Chinatown, they weren't going to stay after work hours. So we also had to have focus groups for the people in the nonprofit to come into the neighborhood, for work, and then, and they might go somewhere else. So try to figure out where people are needs, and their needs are. For small business owners, we could hardly get them to come out to a meeting because they are all working. They did not want to get away, and take off anytime because, they're running their businesses. And so it's figuring out and understanding sort of those, cultural norms and those work ethics, and trying to reach out accordingly. So, sometimes it was not bringing people together, but talking to people one-on-one, or bringing people together only when it was necessary. So thinking about what our families have gone through and how hard they work, and trying to meet the community members, where they're at. And then Krishna, I wanted to say about affordable housing. We could talk offline, but every affordable housing, I only know the United States, and even in the United States, so it's really different state by state, locality by locality, and there's so many different funding mechanisms, and so it's really hard to say yeah, I can help what's happening in India and Uganda, because they all look very, very different.
Yeah, the idea there is to exchange ideas,
Yeah.
learn from each other. Okay, something that we have done here may not be applicable there, but something we have done might be. Let them benefit from it. Something that they have done there might be useful here. So it's a learning process.
Yeah, and one thing that's starting to happen is modular housing. So I feel like that could go in multiple locales.
And in fact, I went to a factory about 2 months ago to look at the process. It's impressive. They're looking at turning out two units per day. And the idea was to see if we can have them replicate the factory in Ukraine once the conditions get a little better. But there's going to be a tremendous demand for it. And then I started the URAG program, Ukraine Reconstruction Effort, under the APAID, International Division. So, that's what I picked up on. I said, housing is going to be one of the things they will need. If we can replicate these, build them offline, and then when the right time comes, distributed there. They can use it, rapid rehabilitation instead of putting up tents. Then there was an earthquake in Turkey. Then there was the earthquake in Morocco. So you know the sphere keeps expanding. So you never know where it'll end up. But yeah, we can talk about affordable housing offline. You are in the Bay Area, right, Erika?
Yes, national capacity, the three panelists from there are in California, and then E is on the other coast in DC.
Yeah, Tan is down there. Yeah. E, you talk about tourism. Have you done,
Yeah.
you know, with your family background, have you done anything about tourism and how it impacts quality of life for the local area?
I mean, I can also relate that to the question that Ted asked about like, has my immigration like experience really shaped my perspective? I would, I mean, of course, yes. And I think one very important thing that shaped my experience or how I look at the planning is the, you know, the city, the living experience of the city that I grew up. I grew up in Chengdu, China, and Chengdu is like one of the most popular tourist destination in China. And they have a lot of natural and cultural heritage. And also because my parents, they are in this kind of industry. So it makes me understand like how important the culture and art aspect is to, you know, to not only just attract other people in the community, but also for the community itself to build their legacy and to like to manifest their culture through different forms of art or heritage preservation. And yes, that also relates to like why I also enjoy like historic preservation part. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. The other thing you mentioned Chengdu. Did you know that APA has done a lot of work in Chengdu?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm forgetting the gentleman's name. He used to be the international director at APA in the 90s and early 2000s. He was very heavily involved with Chengdu and did a lot of consulting work over there.
Wow, good to know.
If I think of his name, I'll send you a note.
Thank you. I definitely would love to learn that.
Talk about historic preservation. We wanted to do a paper at NPC 24 on preserving UNESCO sites, heritage sites in Morocco after the earthquake. But that fell by the wayside, didn't get selected. So, and I think Chheng is the one who mentioned about some interest in Africa and African studies.
Yeah, in my undergrad, I minored in African and African American studies. And to answer your question, I have worked outside of the community of my ancestors. So I worked with folks in Crenshaw, so in LA, during my grad school experience at UCLA, we did a community collaborative project, and it was a research project to recommend property acquisition and community economic development strategies for the Crenshaw community. And in that capstone group, I worked with UCLA faculty, colleagues in like the program as well. And we met regularly with the residents in Crenshaw and also just like nonprofit leaders in the community. So in that space, it was interesting to see like nonprofit, public, and also like academia all in one to do like urban planning. And that was a really great experience. And I've also done a study abroad program in Barcelona, Spain, where we research like infill development and modular housing to assist with gentrification and displacement of, the local community, especially because they're feeling the pressures of tourism and the takeover of Airbnb. So there's just like the struggle of affordable housing and housing access for folks in the area. So those are some of my work experiences like that are cross-cultural.
Yeah, that's good. The only point I was trying to make there was, let's always explore things outside our comfort zone. But the moment you get out of your comfort zone and you succeed professionally and personally, you'll end up feeling more satisfied and more happy than if you just do it within your own community.
Great, thank you. Looking at the time, we have about 11 minutes. We do need to reserve a few minutes for final announcements at the end. But I'll probably give Joyce the last question. Joyce's question in the chat. Joyce, you're welcome to ask your question in your own voice if you wish.
Hello. So thank you, everyone. I'm learning a lot from this panel, and I'm working in a metropolitan planning organization in Stockton in San Joaquin County, just south of the Sacramento County area. So I guess I'm curious for the panelists, given all your work, with API communities and how visionary it often is compared to those of us who work in the public sector, having to mind, a lot of regulations. If any of you are seeing more multi-generational housing being developed for API communities, because in the US, as all of you know, the tendency is to separate our elders and put them in senior-only communities. And so they're not with their children and their grandchildren. And so, which is kind of traditionally how we have lived in the past in our ancestral countries. So just curious if any of the panelists are seeing more multi-generational housing, or if that is even a thing that is being discussed in the areas where you work.
Joyce, that's a great observation and question. And I think there's a tremendous need for more multi-generational housing. Whether we're seeing more of that planned it's a fight, because most new market rate housing is really reserved for couples or a small family. And so the idea of bringing in multiple generations of folks together is really powerful, and it speaks to my family and many of our relatives and friends, right? Like how they would want to age in place. So I think one clue to look at is just looking at immigrant communities like Chinatowns, for instance. These places are, if you think about it, they are a multi-generational community. Seniors can age in place, but yet they're not in an isolated senior living facility somewhere in the suburbs. They can live, work, and shop right in the community in their own language. And meanwhile, they can see their grandkids because their kids drop off their grandkids while they go to work, or while they go to services. So in many ways, immigrant communities like Chinatowns are really great examples of smart growth, of living where it honors the deep connection and cultural traditions and what we recall, right, in terms of keeping the family unit together as we age in place and as we grow as a family. And some things that we're starting to look at more in the suburbs is around how can we work with city municipalities to continue to think of regulation around, or deregulation around making ADUs legalized in such that as a young family you could make use of your ADUs to actually make your house more accommodating to your own family or to low-income relatives. And so I think there's definitely a demand and a need And really, I think working with low-income housing developers are really something we want to push our affordable housing developers to think about, because oftentimes they think of senior housing or family housing, but they don't think about multi-generational housing, which is something else that's critical as we face the silver tsunami.
I just want to add, like, I mean, Ibalti did a commercial real estate development, and one of the aspects, Swan's Market, one of the things that they put in there was co-housing. So like it was an intentional co-housing community, which could be multi-generational as an aspect, but it was also a project that they had to get multiple funding sources for in order to pencil out the project. But co-housing could also be a way to create multi-generational communities.
I haven't really. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Chheng.
Oh, okay. I was just gonna talk about when I was studying like affordable housing development, I think there is a strong emphasis for like family housing, like Roy said, and you know, the separation of elder and senior living centers. But I also want to talk about like the restrictions that come with affordable housing that comes like with like funding. And they're like, I don't know if y'all are familiar with like the Section 8, like and also just like affordable housing regulations where it's very income driven, and it's there are rules that are like, oh, it's like 1.5 persons per room. And I think that also attributes to the lack of generational housing, because it's very like strict and you have to follow those guidelines. And if you don't, you're gonna get kicked out of your units. And it's also hard to manage like just like the complexities of a generational like mission. You know what I'm trying to get at? Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But there are like restrictions that come with like building affordable housing for a multifamily and like generational household. But that's what I wanted to bring up too. It's just like the programs and like the funding have like strong restrictions.
Great. Thank you everyone for their observations and thoughts on that last question. Really appreciate everyone's thoughts, especially people on the particularly everyone on the panel, but also those who were participating in the audience as well. We have 4 minutes left. I know sometimes people like to stick around, but we do have to cut. We'll cut the recording at 90 minutes, but I will leave this open for a few minutes after if anyone wants to, but I do want to respect everyone's time. We all have obligations and families and pets that we need to get to. But I will turn it over to Chheng if Chheng had any last announcements.
Sure. Just want to also reiterate and thank you for today's 5 panelists on the nonprofit sector. Those discussion was very enlightening. I just wanted to mention a few upcoming activities for our Asian and Pacific Islander interest group. We have a number of activities and events at the National Planning Conference in Minneapolis in mid-April, but we do also have one more webinar coming up, and that was in just over 2 weeks from today, 2 weeks and a day from today, Thursday, March 14th. We are continuing our different series, Engagement and Empowerment of Asian Pacific Islander Communities. And this time around, we're going to be talking with 4 speakers from the Pacific Islander community. So that if you're a member of our interest group, you'll get the emails and how to register information. But the event is Thursday, March 14th, and it'll be starting 1 hour earlier than today's webinar. But again, thank you all for joining today, and we'll see you at the next Asian Pacific Islander Interest Group activity or event. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I want to thank all the panelists, and we'll definitely be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.